where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up, Doc? Every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through. Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
WESN.
Hello there and welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. I'm Keaton Shaw. Thank you for joining me as we start another edition of the show this morning. Now, before we get into some regional updates and welcome my first guest, speaking about two news stories which have really... the first story is extremely unfortunate and that is even putting it very lightly. It's with regard to a 1-year-old Venezuelan boy who was beaten by his 28-year-old uncle. Now, on Sunday, apparently, the 1-year-old Venezuelan boy's father was first attacked by this uncle of his. Father was beaten, bloodied, actually so badly that they found him lying in blood. Clearly he couldn't move, clearly he was incapacitated, that's to tell you how bad the beating was. But the uncle then turned his attention onto this 1-year-old child. He beat the child so badly, the child actually suffered from a broken leg, from bruised ribs. He has injuries to his eyes, to his forehead. He was rushed, if I'm not mistaken, to the Sangre Grande Hospital. He's now been transferred to the Port of Spain General Hospital as his condition has gotten worse. Doctors are now trying to save his life this morning, and they're not entirely sure whether or not this Venezuelan boy will make it. 1-year-old, his 28-year-old uncle beat him to a pulp. I can never understand, in all the instances or excuses in this world, why, how. The uncle has since been arrested by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Unfortunately, it's too late. We don't know if this Venezuelan boy will make it. We don't even know if his life will ever be the same should he recover. We can only hope for the best, but it's absolutely ridiculous. It's the very first thing actually that I heard this morning on the news as we got updates. That's not the best way to start the day, of course. There's another news story that is making its rounds, and this is with regards to the Ministry of Health having to seize expired unregistered drugs at 40 businesses across Trinidad and Tobago. The drugs that were seized were estimated to be valued at Trinidad and Tobago $500,000, $500,000. Among the items seized were emergency vitamin drink, which is very popular here in TNT. It's become so popular, especially over the COVID-19 pandemic. But it was the only vitamin mix being seized because the pharmacy owners failed to register the item. In other words, it was a legitimate product, but they failed to register the items. So what's going on here in TNT? I'm happy that the Ministry of Health has cracked down on such instances. But is it that a more stringent approach needs to be taken, especially with the importation and clearance of all these drugs that are coming into the country? And funny enough, and when I say drugs, I don't mean because of the illicit drug trade. I mean because of pharmaceuticals. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, just be very, very careful what you're purchasing. Always ask 100 questions if you need to ask, just to make sure. Do your due diligence if you can. Some of us are none the wiser, but it's your health, and you have absolutely no idea what you're taking. We're going to take a quick break here on the program. When we return, well, I'll welcome my first guest this morning. Stay tuned.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing on it.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is it no pressure on Nicholas Ball?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go there and rep the right and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
August 14th, local government election night returns. Understand what's happening in your community. WESN presents our special election coverage with a panel of trusted citizens and context you will not get elsewhere. Special coverage begins from 7 p.m. on the premier platform for Caribbean content, WESN.
My name is Carl Media, and I'm the founder and the host of Ever Increasing Voice Ministries. Join me every Saturday and Sunday on WESN, this powerful station, at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. nightly. Also on Sundays, I'll be on at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. at night time. When you come here, we are getting people heavenly ready.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
Welcome back to AM Prime, and thank you for staying with us this morning, ladies and gentlemen. Now, here in Trinidad and Tobago, we've had politicians who have come, politicians who have gone. All of them have made many promises, and they have not been able to achieve every single one of them. But what we're hearing now from all political fronts is giving youth an opportunity. We do have young political leaders here in Trinidad and Tobago, some of them striving to make a difference, some of them in politics perhaps for their own personal gain, some of them in politics perhaps that is just the only way they'll have some form of security. However, what is it like being a young politician in Trinidad and Tobago, trying to fight, trying your very best for a cause, to push for a cause, and yet not necessarily getting any leeway because you're being blocked by the older heads? Is that the case? Or is it becoming more and more easier to lay some level of influence given the rise of social media as well as social influencers? Well, I'm joined this morning by an individual who has held many positions, including that as a former independent senator as the political leader of a progressive party, as well as an individual, funny enough, who has sat in the very position that I am in right now. I'm joined by Nikolai Edwards. He's with us via Zoom. Mr. Edwards, good morning.
Good morning, Keaton, and good morning to your viewers.
Well, Nikolai, thanks so much for joining me. I know that perhaps you're accustomed to sitting in the position that I'm in, interviewing a guest, but it's good to see that the roles are reversed. To try and get an idea, actually, as to your perspective as a young politician here in Trinidad and Tobago, more specifically, actually, that you were most open recently by sharing some confessions, being brutally honest about your perspectives of Trinidad and Tobago, where we are as a nation, and possibly where we're heading. But let me start the conversation by asking you, what led you to the direction of politics, especially one where you're not joining, I suppose, a political party that is very much influenced already in TNT, that's foundations have been set. The more popular political parties, you've decided to enter politics from your own perspective and your own side. Why?
Now, in 2009, I had a brush with youth development work, I would say, when Trinidad and Tobago hosted the Commonwealth Youth Forum as part of the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. I was lucky enough to have submitted my nomination to participate, and I was successful as one of 50 young Trinbagonians who had the full experience of understanding youth development, how the Commonwealth operates, and so forth. And it was really a life-changing experience, one that I had been seeking, I think, up until that point and thereafter, because following that event, I really wanted to get involved. I wanted a space to operate within in terms of that youth space, and I found that it was very difficult to find that. So fast forward to my time at the University of the West Indies, I would have been very much involved on campus. Persons may remember me from serving on the Guild of Students, and that's where I was really thrust onto the national scene. So I served at the UWI Guild of Students, St. Augustine, for some time in various positions. And it was following that that I got involved with the Commonwealth Youth Council as the Vice President, Vice Chairperson, Policy, Advocacy and Projects, and representing 1.2 billion young people. So from there, President Anthony Kamuna was very much paying attention to the work that I was getting involved in and so forth. And to cut a long story short, he afforded me the opportunity in 2017 to serve as a temporary independent senator because, again, of the work that I had been involved in the youth space. I would have served for the duration of 2017 a number of times in that seat as independent senator, the youngest ever, and still holding that title, if you would. But that got me very much thinking about where would I be seeing myself 5 years after that and so forth. And I just did not see myself joining either the PNM or the UNC. And the reason was simple. It just, both parties, neither of those parties interest me. And to this date, they just do not resonate with me. So that led me to form the Progressive Party in 2019. I contested the general elections in 2020 for San Fernando West. And that's really how I entered into politics. So it came from a position of getting involved in a youth space, fighting for young people, youth development. That was the cause that I stuck with. And it allowed me to navigate into that political arena.
Now, should you not have been afforded that opportunity to serve as an independent senator, how different do you think your life would have been now? How different do you think your vision or your goals would have been?
Sure. I think in terms of my goals, my ambition, it would have been the same. I think I may have just been forging a path in another direction because truth be told, when I launched the Progressive Party back in 2019, I was a member of the Procurement Board of Trinidad and Tobago, the youngest member of the first installation of that board. And so I would have been in that position and only resigning to follow the path of forming my my own political party. So I may have very well still been active in a number of spaces, and I still am. I'm the vice chairperson of the San Fernando West Secondary Local School Board. I used to sit on the board of directors for a local credit union. So I had very much been interested in developing Trinidad and Tobago in whatever space that I could have found myself in, using those goodly offices to really make a difference. So even if it weren't politics, I was very much involved in civil society, and I've always considered myself as having one foot in civil society and one foot in politics, trying to bridge the gap. And just if I can, Keaton, my position has very much been that the civil society movement or civil society actors are the backbone of this country. And it puzzled me why, as persons involved in various causes and so forth, we had to wait for the government to change or after an election to see who would become our so-called line minister. And then we will go begging cap in hand for support, which inter alia really meant support for the country as a whole. And I felt it was time that civil society started mobilizing. So putting forward candidates in an election to represent the various interests of civil society, which again is more or less the interests of the people of this country. So I decided to launch forward. I had no problem being the first, even the sheep being slaughtered, so to say. But I really wanted to make a strong statement that in order for us to be the determinants of our own future and that of others, we had to fight to get into certain spaces to make a difference.
Since 2009, you've been involved. Fast forward now to about 14 years later. How has the instances of your views of politics here in Trinidad and Tobago evolved? How do you, in those 14 years, the future of Trinidad and Tobago, how has that evolved in your mind as well?
Well, for one, I think that Trinidad and Tobago is sorely lacking when it comes to the kind of development that we could accomplish at this very moment. It would be very disingenuous for me to say that Trinidad and Tobago is not experiencing development, but the question is really, are we experiencing the kind of development that we want as a people and at the pace that we think we should be moving forward, considering we've had monies coming in from the energy sector, which has really driven our economy. But I just feel as though there is a paucity of good leadership in this country. You can find a leader on any corner. Yeah? Anyone who is willing to lead, and there are people who are willing to follow, you can find a leader. But in terms of good leadership and broad leadership, I think that that's sorely lacking because we're very much partisan. We're taking a very much adversarial approach to a number of issues that one would think should be common sense. So as a young person living in Trinidad and Tobago, it's very disheartening. It's very troubling. Many times I really am just frustrated thinking about where we could be as a country and why we're not getting there. And I've been willing to support any government that comes into office that is really prioritizing the issues that affect people and specifically the issues of young people. And I am yet to see a government that has seriously put pedal to the metal, as we say, chest to the wheel in terms of moving the youth agenda forward or developing young people in a way that is sustainable. So at this point, looking on, I mean, I will always be proud to be Trinbagonian, but there are days where I'm really wondering if this is all, if there isn't more that we should be pursuing and could be pursuing as a population.
Let's break this down a little bit. Let's first speak about partisan politics. There are many young people now who are involved in active politics, and many young people who are partisan to one political party, of course. Do you believe that you need to adopt such a position in order to gain any level of opportunity here in TNT? I mean, you can also speak from the aspect that you're the leader of your own political party, but in terms of actual opportunity to make some sort of impact, some sort of change, does one need to be partisan?
Yeah, definitely, and quite the contrary. You should not be partisan if you are serious about making a contribution and so forth. The reality, however, is that in Trinidad and Tobago, we think about things in election cycles. We think about what the policies of the country would be over the 5 years that a government is in office. And because we think about things in such short cycles, the reality is very little gets done when we think about what can be accomplished. So young people who are serious about getting involved in one way or another, unfortunately, the reality sinks in very quickly for them that unless you are involved in a political party in some way, form, or fashion, there is a glass ceiling for you. There is a point at which you can't go beyond because you don't have political ties, you don't have certain, you're not rubbing shoulders with certain persons. And these things do happen across the country where we are seeing nepotism, cronyism, and so forth. But the sad thing is that many times we feel as though this is how it is supposed to be because this is how it has been. I think that our generation, a generation of millennials, generation of Gen Zs now as well, I think that we expect more, but at the same time we feel defeated. We really feel defeated because unless we are able to have a seat at the table and make some meaningful impact and change, I think that it's a matter of, well, this is what we have to work with and let's move on. And so people become distracted by many other things, the rigors of life, the day-to-day frustrations, simple thing as taking public transportation and sitting in hours of traffic. You feel defeated. You feel as though you have to overcompensate in certain areas, and as such, your output is whittled down. Your vista is really narrowed, and I think many people are looking toward migration as a real solution to the frustration they feel in this country.
Is Trinidad and Tobago, in the most respectful way, and I suppose the most polite way, is Trinidad and Tobago a society that is one that is helping to foster youth? It is one that is obviously setting a path forward or forging a path currently as we speak for the young people of Trinidad and Tobago. I know you mentioned a lot of people looking to migrate due to really a lack of opportunity. There are many aspects to that as well. But could you see any sort of instances that there is some level of effort being made or geared towards the young people of Trinidad and Tobago that does not come from the young people themselves?
I think that we have seen efforts being made, government come, government go, but the reality is that youth development is not really taking place across a broad sense of the society, a broad sense of the young people. We're not seeing that kind of development taking place because, again, I'll be disingenuous to say that I haven't benefited from Trinidad and Tobago's offerings in terms of GATE. I was able to have my education funded, but the reality is, the sad one at that, is that it's difficult for me to get a job now. And without me having a name or me being involved in extracurricular things and so forth for the majority of my life, the reality is the average young person who does exactly what our elders say, what society says you have to do, walking that path, you go to school, get a good education, and then certain things are supposed to line up. Well, the reality is that's not happening. And we as young people are seeing places that we can make impacts if given the opportunity. And I think for the most part, we're seeing tokenism taking place. So we bring together some young people for some projects and programs which really in the long run have very little meaning or impact. But the reality is we have to have more young people involved in a serious way in order to make decisions. And it should not be reduced to, the idea of youth arms and so on and so forth. It should be more along the lines of, here's what, within the whole on the executive, why can't we finally see a vice president of an organization, a vice chairperson or a chairperson of an organization below the age of 30? Because young people today have the capacity what's the sense educating us in the way that we've been educated, having access to education and not being able to apply it? So young people continue to be frustrated, but also continue to look for outlets. And when we think about business, when we think about the creative arts, we're seeing young people making strides, and there are programs that are being funded and supported by the government. But are these things all aligning toward a shared goal or shared vision for this country, geared to creating a more youth-friendly environment? And the reality is, no, these things are all disjointed. Many times they operate in silos. You see some of the same young people benefiting from programs over and over. They are seen as the elite and so on. And then they get positions and jobs from ministers and political parties, and all that fire and energy and fight that they might have had before, it's all whittled down. And of course, don't get me started in terms of the adversarial nature of politics, where some young people are falling victim to those ways of doing things.
Well, I was just about to ask you, if we take a look at young people, because you said a lot of youth in TNT have the capacity, and one can argue that the youth of today are more liberal in terms of their thinking and approach, although they do have to practice some level of partisan in order to remain in that position that they are in. However, do you think that the attitude and the mindset of the young people today, or even those who refer to themselves as youth leaders or youth influencers, many a times though, I suppose the perspective is that they only want to be in such a position for the social media followers or for the recognition, for the prestige that goes with it, only caring about themselves and not actually about the cause or the organization or the work that should go involved. Do young people in TNT have the attitude and the mindset?
Yeah, I don't think that we could look at the ones who are making the most noise, and I say that in a respectful way, in terms of those young people who are more to the forefront, they're more visible, you hear of them more often and so forth. We can't look at those influencer type young people and think this is the be all and end all. Those are a group of young people who understand how to navigate social media, understand how to make an impact in certain areas, but there are far more young people, many more young people who are making valiant impacts in their spaces and places, who are excelling in terms of academia, who are excelling in terms of sports and other places. And I think that we're not giving enough opportunity for more people to strive in those areas. So in terms of those influencers and so forth, they have a responsibility as well. And I think that as a society, that whole idea of being insensitive to certain things, being selfish to certain things, well, the reality is that's the kind of society that we as a population have created to some extent. We see these cultures developing in other more developed countries, and we adopt it because we consume the same media. The Internet of Things is easily accessible. We follow global music and trends, and I think in all of that we are losing a bit of our Caribbean identity and our national identity. But the reality is that this is the kind of society that we've created, and the question really is, what more can you expect? So if we're not making the policy decisions in the places that matter, we're not going to be tuning out the kind of citizen I think that this country deserves. Why aren't we putting more emphasis on civics in our education system? Why is it taking so long for education reform to take effect? It seems as though we're engaging in consultation, it's analysis paralysis, and we have to really hit the warp speed button on these issues, because we're going to have a lost generation. We can even think about that COVID generation, those young people who did not enter secondary school or any institution up until that point with COVID looming, and they missed out on so many opportunities to socialize. So there is going to be a gap. There is going to be that kind of a lost generation that we have an opportunity to reclaim, but with these current policies and initiatives, we're nowhere close to reclaiming that.
I'll tell you what, Nikolai, I like that, analysis paralysis. But let's take a break here on the program now. We'll return. Let's speak about that adversarial side of politics and whether or not young people are also becoming, I suppose, a bit, again, in the most polite way, ignorant to politics deliberately because they're no longer interested. We'll be right back after this.
we exposed 5 strangers to KFC's delicious chicken to see if any time could be KFC time. And at the first bite, the party began. We repeated the experiment during the day, during business hours, on weekends, with sunshine, with rain. And it's confirmed. KFC's flavor makes anytime KFC time. KFC, it's finger licking good.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
The best laptops and tablets are at dbesttoys.com. Get a Gateway 14.1-inch Ultra Slim notebook or an HP 14-inch laptop at the best prices in TNT. Get the Fire 7 tablet for $474. You can also shop the latest Amazon Fire Sticks. Call now at 32-DBEST to order or visit us in-store at Forces Flagship MacBean. Shop online now at dbesttoys.com. Free delivery available throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Cash or links on delivery.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, The Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
August 14th, local government election night returns. Understand what's happening in your community. WESN presents our special election coverage with a panel of trusted citizens and context you will not get elsewhere. Special coverage begins from 7 p.m. on the premier platform for Caribbean content, WESN.
Welcome back to AM Prime this morning. I'm speaking to a young political leader here in Trinidad and Tobago, a man who has sat in my position before, Nikolai Edwards. He's with us via Zoom. We're now going to speak about the adversarial side of politics, as you mentioned earlier, Nikolai, and whether or not the young people of today are leaning towards that type of politics, whether or not they appreciate that level of political rhetoric and banter, as they would refer to, or is that just making them more apathetic towards our politics here in TNT?
I think the reality is that a lot of young people are disgusted by the state of politics in this country, the adversarial nature, the name calling, the race baiting, all of these issues. I think that young people genuinely reject. And I give you the most recent example where we see, of course, these older political leaders, because we have leaders who are well into their 70s, the Prime Minister and the opposition leader, and to make themselves relevant and to keep up with trends and so forth, obviously there will be those who would advise them that there are topics and issues that should be front and center, or buzzwords and all of these things. And we've had the opposition leader speaking about emptying the whole clip, and it just really, on the face of it, it may be comical and reload the matic and these things, because it's the shock value in it is there. Because as a young person who is familiar with the music, hearing the opposition leader rattle out these statements and name dropping and so forth, when in reality these are issues and persons who would in no part of the day occupy the mindset of the political leaders of this country and so forth. But to attract young people, these things are being said and so forth. And it's quite sad. Now, it distorts the message, because you have young people who may very well be understanding of, okay, what you're trying to say, we should have stand your ground legislation, all of these things. But it's a matter of how you say it and how you present it. And it can be very much a turn off to a lot of young people. So these things, I think, make it an election joke for young people, and it's memeable and it goes viral. But when the dust settles, we really have to ask what is in place to educate and to uplift and to improve the lives of the citizens of this country. And we're talking from the level of elected officials. Of course, by having the resources of the government at your disposal and so forth, you would want to try to channel that where appropriate. But on a regular basis, are we seeing these members of parliament interacting with constituents, educating them about elections and the reason why they are there and so forth? But unfortunately, we still have these situations where politicians go around and promise to pave your roads and to give you an HDC house and so forth. I could tell you, Keaton, how many times people have asked me for a house. I don't know how I'm supposed to provide this house. First of all, I'm not in government. I'm not elected. I'm not in a position to do that. But why is it that we feel as though those tangible things, such as a house and so forth, are the be-all and end-all of your relationship with your member of parliament? It should be far deeper than that. Is your member of parliament helping to create the kind of economic space to encourage entrepreneurship in the long run? Are there efforts geared toward, improving the conditions for sporting within a community or the creative arts? Are we seeing a strong push toward tourism and creating jobs and so forth for young people? And we can't necessarily ascribe particular items to certain members of parliament beyond, let's say, the Patrick Manning era and so forth. But in today's world, it's very difficult for you to understand the underlying philosophy of these politicians and their political parties. And so that distortion or that inability to really grasp where they intend to lead you, it is very frustrating for young people, because we want to be clear. We want a better world. We want our children to be raised in a world that is better than what we've been raised in. And we want to contribute to making that world a reality. But young people have the unfortunate reality of benefiting from a political system that locks out those who don't form allegiances to political parties. And that's just the direction that we're currently in right now, heading. And unless we find ways and means of getting more young people into these spaces who have the agenda of understanding, we have to create change from within, we have to create change from the outside, we have to create change from all around in whichever space we operate. I think still resources are a big problem, and that general respect and understanding of the young people's agenda. I think that continues to be a spoke in our wheel. And so many people see young people as just rebellious, as not caring, as nonchalant. But again, this is the point that we've gotten to because of previous generations and the current leadership. It's not just an individual, but the leadership of this country, which seems to be very misdirected.
Nikolai, what makes a good leader?
I think for sure a great leader is one who listens, is one who acts based on that listening, and whose intention always remains the same, of service to those around. I think that we have seen leaders or persons enter into that leadership suit, really take some kinds of approaches to their role and position that has you baffled and wondering. Because why are we seeing decisions being made on behalf of a group of people in this country without including them in a serious way? It's funny that we don't have a National Youth Council in this country after so many years. I think the last official National Youth Council was disbanded in 2011. We're in 2023. We are yet to have a National Youth Council. We have the Trinidad Youth Council and the Tobago Youth Council, both of which are NGOs, but neither of which are the nationally recognized youth body that has some kind of legislative backing or has been really taken through the parliament and given the kind of respect and a permanent place that it deserves. So when we have these kinds of issues, and many people don't think about it on a daily basis, and that's just reality because you're so so caught up thinking about the high prices of food. You're thinking about crime and criminality. You're thinking about how safe it is for you to even exit your yard. And these things are things that matter, that are important, but they're also the kinds of distractions that persons will fall victim to very early on and not think about the picture down the road. How are we putting policies and legislation in place to create a strong foundation upon which the same advocacy that we're talking about can be pursued? So leadership, there's not a paucity of leaders across this country. There's a paucity of good leadership, leadership that is responsive, leadership that understands, and leadership that is willing to, I think, meander accordingly when we see the change in the tenor from the population due to various trends and so forth. That's what we're lacking.
Nikolai, why is it that you're still in Trinidad and Tobago? Why is it that you still choose to remain here in TNT and even choose to still pursue politics, even not from an established viewpoint, but one individual who has already a name and is known within the public sphere, but not necessarily established? Why are you still here?
Yeah, that's a question I ask myself every day. It's unfortunate, and I hate to admit it, but that's the reality. Just a couple of hours ago, a friend of mine was actually telling me or making that same point. Why am I still here? He feels as though I should leave Trinidad and Tobago because the opportunities would be better for me elsewhere. And you know what? I think he's right, and I think many people who tell me that are correct. But this is where I was born. This is where I was raised. This is where my family is. This is a country that I pledge my allegiance to. I want to see Trinidad and Tobago win. I want to see our government win, because to wish a government ill or malice or what have you, I think is really to wish our people ill and our people malice, because the success of a government is supposed to translate into the success of a people as a whole. But in terms of what's keeping me here, I mean, it's just really love for country. The reality is I don't have a job, and I've been searching, and just like many other people, you know, educated, have experience, but the job market is extremely small in this country. And so that has an impact on my ability to advocate, to get involved, to be consistent. I'll share with you, Keaton, I would have loved the opportunity to contest the local government elections this year. Love the opportunity to do that, because essentially that's why you have a political party, to contest elections, to inject your philosophies and thinking and approaches into the spaces that are necessary. But the reality is I don't have resources, and the party as a whole has no resources to pursue a local government run at this point. And people think that it's very easy for alternative parties, as we call them, because we don't refer to parties as third parties. It gives you the impression that there is a first and a second party and everything else is third. But we don't subscribe to that. So alternative parties, options. We know that there are many challenges facing those parties and individuals who would love the opportunity to serve. It feels as though you have to go through a war zone to be afforded the opportunity to serve your fellow countrymen, and that's sad. It should not be about the mudslinging and gutter politics and so forth. But I will say that the Prime Minister, who has been the biggest disappointment for me in terms of being in a position to pilot, promising, introducing legislation to help clean up the political landscape in this country. The Prime Minister has simply dropped the ball, because it was in 2020 that the Representation of the People Amendment Bill was introduced into Parliament with great fanfare. The Prime Minister spoke about finally dealing with campaign financing and these different aspects, finally registering political parties, because I'm not sure if the population is aware, but we don't have a body in this country that recognizes or that confirms political parties, that regulates political parties in this country. The EBC will accept your symbol under which you would run as a candidate, but to say the recognition for political parties, we don't have it in this country. So the Prime Minister was introducing or has introduced legislation to deal with that and a number of things to even the playing field. But we're in 2023, 3 years later, and we have not seen any real progress on that legislation. So
Nikolai,
it's really...
Sorry to interject. We have about 2 minutes left, and still a lot more I can speak to you about, actually. But recently you made confessions openly about the change that we all wish for here in TNT, or at least most of us wish for, especially young people. That's not going to happen anytime soon. You've also just suggested that, yes, why am I still in TNT? Chances are I'll have more opportunity abroad, but this is the country that you were brought up in, where you were born, and even the country that has given to you. You mentioned the GATE program and other affordabilities. However, if that change that many of us seek will not come anytime soon, do you see your future here in Trinidad and Tobago?
Yeah. It's funny, but I probably am the captain going down with the Titanic. I refuse to abandon ship. And so I see it as my responsibility to do what I can in order to save this ship. So I will continue to take a bucket and throw out water despite there being a big hole in the side of the ship, because if not me, someone in the future will benefit from the hard work that I am putting out there. And that's what it really is about, creating the environment for the next generation. So I can't afford to let the voice that I have been given just slip away. I've been offered education, opportunities, and so forth, and I have a responsibility to really pave a way for other persons, and I will continue to do that until I die. And even if I take up work or opportunities outside of Trinidad and Tobago, it will be with the intention to bring home as much experience and opportunities for other young people and programs and initiatives that we can develop right here in this country to the betterment of us as a whole.
Nicola Edwards, it was certainly a pleasure having this opportunity to have this discussion with you this morning. Thank you very much for the time, and thank you very much for speaking at length on many issues. Again, a lot more I can speak about, a lot more I would like to get into. We spoke about our past, we spoke about our present. I think we only touched on the future. I think there's a lot more that we can get into with regards to our future here in TNT. Unfortunately, time doesn't permit this morning. But I wish you a grand day ahead, and just like you, I must confess as well, I feel this this sense of loyalty where I will go down with the ship as well. Because even in my position, it's not difficult. It's not easy. It's become extremely difficult. But I don't know. It's some level of love that I can't really explain with words that still has me here. Nikolai, all the best.
TNT, that's what it is.
I think that's what it is. There's still that sweet TNT factor that pulls you back all the time. Nikolai, have a very good day, my friend.
As well.
Nikolai Edwards, former independent senator and political leader of the Progressive Party, plain, simple, honest about what is happening here in TNT and about the direction of youth, at least what he is seeing, what he has experienced, and even where we're heading. Ladies and gentlemen, we take a break here on AM Prime.
Here is your WESN News on the Hour. I am Sierra Ali. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Police examining social media posts showing a gun target at the heart of the Prime Minister. Special voting begins for over 13,000 special voters for local government elections. Drone operation unearthed among maximum security prisoners. Regionally, Antiguan mother and daughter win Virgin Galactic trip to space. Now for the details. Police are presently examining a social media post showing a gun target at the heart of the Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley. The 12-second video is captioned, "Load the Matic and empty the clip on them, August 14th. Local government elections will be held on August 14th. In the video, opposition leader Kalma Prasad Bisasa appears in a box on the top left of the screen on the political platform saying, "We have to load up this matic. We have to pull it back. You have to lock it again, then lock it again." There are 13,284 special electors eligible to begin voting today for the local government elections, according to the EBC. The EBC says these polling stations will operate from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. until Sunday, August 13th. Additional polling stations have also been established by the EBC and will operate from Tuesday 8th to Thursday 10th August 2023 from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Officials assigned to investigate incidents of unmanned drones appearing in and around the nation's prisons believe they have unearthed a widespread network of criminal figures using the devices to not only smuggle contraband but monitor the layout of the facilities. According to a news report, a document purported to originate from one of the investigating prison officers has surfaced on social media and alleged that at least 4 groups of prisoners have been implicated in the use of drones. One of the groups involves a high-ranking underworld figure whose brother is believed to be the pilot of the drones. The use of the drones in transporting drugs, weapons, cell phones, and other restricted materials to inmates has assumed greater focus in recent times, as the devices have been spotted at several prisons across TNT. But further disturbing is the allegations that the devices may be used by inmates themselves to explore the layout of cell blocks at night and day. The document adds that police have been notified, but officers are still awaiting further instructions on what will be done in response. Regionally, an 18-year-old Aberdeen University student and her mother will travel to space later this week after winning a place on Virgin Galactic's second commercial flight in a prize draw. Anastasia Myers and her mom, Keisha Skarhaf, will be the first mother and daughter to go to space. They will also be the first people from the Caribbean to make the journey. The pair will take off from New Mexico on Thursday. Keisha was also traveling to the UK to sort out her daughter's visa when she entered the competition. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I am Sira Ali. Thanks for watching.
August 14th, local government election night returns. Understand what's happening in your community. WESN presents our special election coverage with a panel of trusted citizens and context you will not get elsewhere. Special coverage begins from 7 p.m. on the premier platform for Caribbean content, WESN.
This city can't hold me, my vibe's too high, and my heart it told me jump right now, you will touch the sky. Feel my love unfolding like a laughing flame. All who did not know me when not done, they gon' know the name. Million people coming down, dancing to a song. Love is life and life is love, blessings from above. Can you feel the love that's in the air? Well, if you feel it, let me hear you say, dancing, moving, moving everywhere. If you feel it, let me hear you say, na 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 na, eh na 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 na.
When I lost them, can't find my way. Is your love help me elevate? And when they try to block, I still come again. It's the way you lift me up. I could never give it up, no.
This is the way we celebrate independence. This is how it should be done. An event like this brings everybody out. All different race, creed, everything. This is our country. And how is the best way to celebrate our independence? with our national instrument. The vision I had 6 years ago, trying to make people happy. We started this event not to stop. This event must continue. And at independence, we could celebrate it together as a country. Even though the hard things, struggles, we will always remain together as one people. Thank you.
Welcome back to the program. My next guest joining me is to speak about local government elections, but not just about the campaign in particular, but results from a poll from the North American Caribbean Teachers Association, also known as NACTA. Now, the poll had 430 eligible voters that were interviewed at random, reflecting on the demographics of the population here in Trinidad and Tobago. The survey being coordinated by NACTA founder Dr. Vishnu Bisram. Now, the poll actually found that 70% of people will not vote in the election. Some might argue that is the usual case when it comes to local government elections. Nobody really takes it seriously. But the poll also went to suggest that neither the People's National Movement nor the United National Congress and their particular, I suppose, partnerships or alliance, however you like to refer to it, are gaining enough support to allow either of them to win one of the 7 local government corporations that each of them currently hold. Well, joining me is geopolitical analyst Dr. Shane Mohammed. He's with us via Zoom. He's actually outside the Red House this morning. Hello, Shane. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Not too bad. Just watching one and trying to, understand the dynamics that are playing out, because it's a bit of a different arrangement this time around compared to 2016 and 2019, which makes for some very interesting results if the various parties that are participating in the election do make an impact on the population, and that the voting population comes out, which is something that we have to also consider that may or may not happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, Shane, I think if you yourself are sitting around digesting it, what does that say for individuals like myself? I mean, remember, I was under your guidance at one point. But before we get into the meat of this conversation, can we actually trust these polls? I mean, do they actually mean much?
Well, this is the first time, to be quite honest, that I am paying attention, not in depth, in a very in-depth manner, because this is the first time I'm paying attention to the NACTA poll specifically, because this NACTA poll gives some level of scientific perspective with regard to how many people were polled and that sort of thing. They don't always get it right. They've not gotten it right within the recent past. But given that they spoke about the sampling that they took, I thought it was interesting that they went down the scientific route, which is important. Am I taking it seriously? No. Is it under consideration? To a certain extent. Because, as I say, only because of the fact that they provided some scientific evidence as to how they came about their findings. There are going to be corporations that are going to stay within the UNC and stay within the PNM. Mm-hmm. That's a given fact. There are seats that may or may not flip. And Keaton, as you know, in local government elections, because we are dealing with electoral districts, 100 votes, 50 votes are a matter. 50 votes can make the difference between a political party winning a seat or losing it. Mm-hmm. 200 votes can make an impact in how a corporation is configured. So this makes for very interesting times. And if you listen to the people out there, they're not very happy. They're not happy with both the UNC or the PNM. But it's not as cut and dry as it was before, because in 2019 we had smaller parties, yes, but it was in most instances a straight fight between the UNC and the PNM.
Yes.
In this instance, it's not as clear-cut as it was before. We have an alliance between the UNC, the NTA, and the incorporation now, or the return, I should say, of Mr. Warner into the UNC. We have the PP and the Farmers Alliance. That should not be discounted as well, because regardless of whether you like Philip Alexander or not, he has been able to make a level of impact in people's minds and provide them with a quote-unquote reality that they're not hearing from traditional politicians. Mm-hmm. Then we have the PNM, who continues to be a very strong party, but there is a bit of concern with regard to the utterances of the Prime Minister within the recent past, and whether or not, and people have not, Trinidad does not understand Tobago politics, but Tobago is very much upset with the approach that the Prime Minister has taken, and they are very cautious, but they're heeding what the Chief Secretary has said in the last couple of weeks regarding the Prime Minister and the whole plot against the THA. So, and there's been a lot of editorials and a lot of commentary. In fact, the most significant input in terms of the dialogue regarding the THA and the People's National Movement, I saw, which for me is very important for the people of Trinidad and Tobago to pay attention to, is that of Pastor Clive Dutton. So, we have, it's a very interesting period of time. Do I expect a very high voter turnout? No. Do I, from what I have been gathering over the last couple of weeks, young people are not going to vote. They're not coming out to vote.
Now, Dr. Mohammed, let me interrupt you there for a moment. You've mentioned quite a lot, and a lot of very good information. You've mentioned young people, but you've also mentioned traditional politics. Now, one of the findings of the polls suggested was an uphill task for either party to gain the support of their traditional base. Younger East Indian voters are crossing over to the People's National Movement, according to the poll, because they see limited political hope and opportunities compared to seen in the current United National Congress. The poll said there is hardly any similar ethnic crossover voters to the UNC, with Afro-Trinidadians and mixed voters turned off from some of the political personalities in the opposition camp, but it's a similar thing also being expressed by traditional People's National Movement supporters. But a lot of focus on the young people. Is it that, one, though traditional politicians are not moving away from the scene for whatever the reason may be, people are moving away from the traditional politicians and the traditional politics? And two, is it that we probably have, and without trying to sound too arrogant here, probably a bit more educated younger population, more free-thinking, liberal-minded youth in TNT that are opening their eyes and not necessarily floating to the traditional base of which their families support?
You've used a very important word in your discussion and in your questions, and that is the word called opportunity. And that's a very dangerous word in political science, because in political science we talk about ideology,
yes,
philosophy, and belief systems, right? Nowhere in political science do we ever speak about opportunity. People follow political parties because of a belief system, because of values, because of philosophy, because of ideology. And here we are in 2023 in Trinidad and Tobago, where we introduced the word opportunity. And when people start moving towards a political organization because of an opportunity, it doesn't necessarily mean that they subscribe to a political party's ideology, philosophy, and belief systems, but they are looking after themselves. And they are looking after themselves because there's a need a need to serve. There's a desire to serve, I should say. 2, and the fact that so many young people have shifted to the PNM is because the PNM has a more structured and more stable, but more importantly, a more structured format in which it selects its candidates. For the longest time that we can remember, the PNM has been trying its best to diversify the party and move away from the traditional perspective and the traditional belief that the PNM is just simply a party for Afro-Trinbagonians.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen that move but over the years by various leaders. The most significant has been that when Mr. Manning was in power, we are now seeing that Dr. Rowley is doing the very same thing. The question arises, though, do these young people, and as you say, these traditional East Indian voters that have shifted towards the PNM, how many of them, we need to calculate how many of them has the chance of winning the seats that they are contesting, because they are also contesting seats in traditional UNC seats, right? So that's one question that must be asked. And even if they are successful, or let's just say unsuccessful in their quest to serve, how many of them can be afforded an opportunity in the People's National Movement for continuity and to be able to sustain their desire to serve the country? And opportunity should not be about self. The opportunity to serve is what is important, especially in politics and political science. The opportunity must be an opportunity to serve the people, to make a difference in one's community, to serve one's community members, to serve their villages, their towns. It should never be about serving because of self, because also in political science we teach about servant leadership, and it's about giving yourself to the people of a nation, and in this instance, the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So, it's a very, I wouldn't say dangerous, but I feel it's a very, it's not the essence of true politics as we learn it and we know it to be. And then people will come and say to me, well, time has changed and the essence of true politics has changed because politics has a minor morality of its own. Yes, politics does have a morality of its own, as for Machiavelli, yes, and as for the Machiavellian style of politics. And I am the first person to say that I do subscribe to the Machiavellian style of politics because it's politics in its truth and real, the most real form. But on the flip side, you have the UNC. I listened to Mrs. Prasad Bissessa, it had to be when she had that joint meeting and Mr. Warner went back, mounted the platform. And I will say to you what I've said to every single media house out there. In her speech, she talked about the web that was weaved, that has been weaved by Dr. Rowley. And she said, oh, what a tangle web we weave. And it caught my attention because I said to myself, lady, you should speak about, you shouldn't talk about what a tangle web you weave. Dr. Rowley has weaved, but you should really concentrate on what a tangled web you have weaved. Because had you not weaved that tangled web, Mr. Warner should not have left the UNC in the first place, nor should have Mr. Griffith left the UNC in the first place. And had that web not been weaved and not been weaved out of control, you may still have been in government today, and your party may have been even stronger than it was in 2010.
Well, what do you think? What do you think is the impact of those two individuals? Now, on one hand, you have Mr. Griffith, who's the political leader of a new political entity. On the other hand, you have Mr. Jack Warner, who has now disbanded the ILP. It's now part of the United National Congress. But what is the impact of these two individuals joining with the United National Congress, and how would people react to that?
Well, I think most people, most traditional voters and most members of the UNC, traditional members of the UNC, are elated at the fact that Mr. Warner has returned, because they will not say it the way I have said it, because but they are excited and jubilant by the fact that Mr. Warner has come back to the party. Mainly because Mr. Warner brought to the United National Congress a sense of stability, a sense of organization, a sense of structure. In fact, if you look at that Center of Excellence meeting that was done, that was Mr. Warner's production in every sense of the word, from the styling of the stage to the formatting of the music to how people spoke. Back in the day, everybody knew that Mr. Warner was responsible for ensuring that the meetings and the political platforms and the flow of speakers and all that was very well organized and put together. So it was very much reminiscent of what he's capable of doing in terms of party structure and organization. That's one. But also that Mr. Warner is he's a charismatic speaker. You cannot deny the fact that he's has been always, not just now, but always, an invigorator of the crowd and an excellent political orator. So much so that coming before Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar, I thought that she would have been prepared to feed off of the energy that he would have left on the platform, and provide a speech or give a speech that was extremely inspiring and all-embracing, and one that would have jolted the minds of those that are in doubt to maybe rethink their position. But then she descended into speaking to the traditional voters and speaking to people and saying things like, she has elevated the children of the party, and the children of the UNC has been moved from councillors to members of parliament, etc., etc., and that in her deepest, darkest hours that she did not forget that it is the loyalists of the party that stood by her and defended the party. And I am saying to myself, what exactly are you doing, lady? What are you, you are literally, you have Mr. Warner sitting in front of you. He has dissolved the ILP. He has taken 10 years before he came back to the UNC, and a UNC that he should have never left in the first place, but for your tangled web that you weaved and was unable to control. And you are here talking about, deepest, darkest hours, you continue to remember those that stood with you in the vineyard. Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. It's a slap in the face to even Mr. Warner and anyone who is thinking about returning to the UNC, because the UNC is not only about the traditional voters, the UNC is also about the swing voters, the marginal seat voters, the young people, the young professionals, the independent thinkers. That's what the UNC should be running after.
So what we're really seeing taking place is, once more, drumming up that support within the traditional base, as you've mentioned. But no concrete efforts, no real efforts that we can argue of bringing new support, of bringing new minds to the party, bringing a wider support base to the party. We're just seeing them trying to clasp onto the support that they've already had, or probably losing, if that's the case.
that may very well be the job of Mr. Warner and Mr. Griffith. They may very well be charged with the responsibility of drumming up support from the traditional voter, from the marginal seat voters, the swing voters, the young professionals. There are also a group of young people who do not understand the political history across the board of Trinidad and Tobago, so they will not understand the value of Mr. Warner, and people may be confused. Well, what is the big deal about young people, especially may wonder what is the big deal about Mr. Warner returning to the party, and that is for also the political party itself, the UNC, to explain, to be honest and explain to the young voters and the people that they are trying to attract what is the value that Mr. Warner brings to the party and the contribution that he's made over the years to the United National Congress, which nobody can dispute. And if we are teaching political science, and one of the things you would know, Keaton, is that political parties are charged with the responsibility of providing information. Not just, it's not their responsibility, their sole responsibility is, according to Machiavelli, to win elections and to sustain power and that sort of thing. But part of that is also about teaching the young people and teaching those that are that don't know what is the value of Mr. Warner to a stage, or what is the value of Mr. Warner to a political party. And between the period 20, not even, it is even prior to 2010, I could go all the way back to 2007, when there was a split between the COP and the UNC. Mr. Warner played a pivotal role in trying to gauge an accommodation and try to pull the parties together to say, let's see, if we can work together. It didn't work in 2007, but the opportunity came again in 2010, and he was very much front and center and very much a part of that coming together of people's ideologies, philosophies, and putting it into one big framework where everybody got an equal say, and everybody got a chance to express their views and that sort of thing. When Mr. Warner left in 2013 and was, so disrespectfully removed from the partnerships cabinet and then the United National Congress, we saw what the results of that was. So,
right, Dr. Mohammed, before, I'm so sorry, we're running out of time, but I have to slip in one more question, and that is whether or not we see the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago becoming apathetic to politics, because the relationship, I suppose, between the People's National Movement and the United National Congress, both parties have decided to take this combative approach to politics. Do you think that the population is disgusted by this lack of cooperation between both parties? I mean, it's really, you see that happening all the time with opposition parties and the sitting government. But this combative, hardline approach from both political parties, do you think that has caused the population to become apathetic towards politics?
Apathetic is an understatement. They're not only apathetic, they're disgusted, they're frustrated, they're fed up, and all the other adjectives that goes with those words. I can safely say that this is the worst that our democracy has seen as it pertains to two political parties functioning in the Red House. There's no level of cooperation. There's no attempts to bridge the gap. The Prime Minister has his belief system about the UNC and the opposition. He was very steadfast there, and he's not willing to even try to mend a bridge. When the UNC says it is willing to assist, there's a doubt as to their genuinity and their commitment to assisting, because quite often they meet and then that meeting falls apart because there's a disagreement and they can't meet a middle ground. There's no set of political negotiations between the both political leaders. There's a huge level of arrogance that exists with regard to the leadership of both parties. I would even go down the road to say, unfortunately, sometimes you see a level of hatred that should never happen. Because if you look, we have two very clear persons that we could refer to and make reference to with regard to how they operated in the parliament and even in the politics of Trinidad and Tobago. And that is the relationship between Mr. Manning and Mr. Pandey. And they both agreed that even, and Mr. Pandey had said it, he said in politics and in the Red House, they were political enemies. But outside of that, they were both citizens of Trinidad and Tobago and leaders of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And outside of that political setting, they were in fact friends.
Yes.
And what we have to remember is that we must be able to have differences of opinions, we must have differences of ideologies and philosophies, but at the end of the day, it is the welfare of the people of Trinidad and Tobago that matters most, and that is what should unite us. And that the welfare and the betterment of the lives of the people of Trinidad and Tobago across the board, whether they come from the upper echelons of the society to down to the bottom, down where people are struggling to make ends meet, we should be focusing on how we can improve lives and livelihoods across the board. And our policies should be able to align. Where we disagree, we should be able to sit down and talk about it and have a discussion about it and meet and have a middle ground. When it comes to legislation and laws, we should be open-minded because not everyone is going to get it right. And we saw that with the procurement legislation. So therefore, we should be able, as mature politicians over the years, especially Mrs. Pasabi-Sessa and Dr. Rowley, having served in the parliament for so many years, having served in so many different administrations and in different roles and capacities within their political parties and within the parliament, they should be able to have the wisdom and the understanding to sit down and discuss the people's business in a manner that is not divisive and is not adversarial, because the adversarial approach is only going to take us into a deadlock, and that is where we are today. And the option to that, deadlock and that the frustration, apathy, the feeling of fed up, the feeling of despair, hopelessness, may only arise if a new political party comes on board and provides the people of Trinidad and Tobago with a very strong alternative and a very modern way of thinking about politics in Trinidad and Tobago.
Dr. Shane Mohammed, I think that's a great way to end the discussion, and I suppose just to give a trailer to part 2, where we have to speak about smaller political parties and the rise, I suppose, because one of the other suggestions from the poll is that younger people are swaying more so to these smaller political parties. So we do have to have that discussion, but let's pause there for now. I want to thank you very much for your analysis this morning, and we'll be in contact for part 2 very soon. Hopefully this week, actually, we can have that conversation. But for now, Dr. Mohammed, appreciate it. Do have a great day ahead and all the very best.
Thank you so much, Keaton. You too.
And by the way, you've raised some memories there. I would encourage anybody who gets the opportunity to read The Prince by Machiavelli to do so.
I agree.
Dr. Shane Mohammed joining us once more on AM Prime this morning, ladies and gentlemen. That's it for this edition of the program. Wishing you a grand day ahead, a great one actually, and happy Emancipation Day to the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, to all who are celebrating and taking part in the festivities surrounding Emancipation Day, as well as the commemorations and, of course, the tribute to Lord Relator as well, who is part of the Emancipation Support Committee's, I suppose, celebrations and festivities with regard to Emancipation Day. So Emancipation Day greetings to all across TNT from AM Prime and from WESN Content Capital. Thank you for making the time to join me this morning. I'm Keaton Shaw. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
WESN.
August 14th, local government election night returns. Understand what's happening in your community. WESN presents our special election coverage with a panel of trusted citizens and context you will not get elsewhere. Special coverage begins from 7 p.m. on the premier platform for Caribbean content, WESN.
My name is Carl Media. I'm the founder and the host of Ever Increasing Voice Ministries. Join me every Saturday and Sunday on WESN, this powerful station, at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. nightly. Also on Sundays, I'll be on at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. at night time. When you come here, we are getting people heavenly ready.
What's the best way to grab the attention of viewers? Please exercise more patience. You have to be kidding me.
Doing what we do best. I'll say at the very least it's a conspiracy of laziness against the people.
Join me, Keaton Shaw.
And me, Sean Michael Small, for Talking Point.
Weekdays from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
We go in-depth on the trending issues and engage the most controversial newsmakers
as we get them to account to the people for their actions.
You can't go to the government with nothing. You can't go to cabinet with an empty hand, with a wish.
I'm glad that we're having this a sober, mature discussion.
In the present situation, I expect a continuation of the chaos.
Join us for the discussion, Mondays to Fridays,
only on WESN,
the content capital.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit? Yes. What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it. It is not punitive, it is not rehabilitative.
We, the police officers, we are professional, and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole, it's for all of us in public.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you do now, Andre.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is it no pressure on Nicholas Paul?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the red, white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
This city can't hold me, my vibe's too high, and my heart it told me jump right now, you will touch the sky. Feel my love unfolding like a laughing flame. All who did not know me when not done, they gon' know the name. Million people coming down, dancing to a song. Love is life and life is love, blessings from above. Can you feel the love that's in the air? Well, if you feel it, let me hear you say, dancing, moving everywhere. If you feel it, let me hear you say, na 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 na, eh na 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 na.
When I lost and can't find my way, is your love help me elevate? And when they try to block, I still come again. It's the way you lift me up, I could never give it up, no.
This is the way we celebrate independence. This is how it should be done. An event like this brings everybody out. All different race, creed, everything. This is our country. And how is the best way to celebrate our independence? With our national anthem. The vision I had 6 years ago, trying to make people happy. We started this event not to stop. This event must continue. At independence, we could celebrate it together as a country. Even though the hard things, the struggles, we will always remain together as one people. Thank you.
Wash over me, take me to the river.
are WESN, the premier platform for Caribbean content. WESN, covering West, East, South, and North. WESN, we entertainment, sports, and news. WESN, available on Greendot 7, Amplia 118, Airlink 17, Bmobile 107, Digicel 21, ICNTT 105, and Flow 110. Connect with us at WESNCC or stream online at www.wesncc.com. WESN, your premier platform for Caribbean content.
claims its troops advanced along the Kupiansk front in northeastern Ukraine, as it too seeks to take back ground.
Over the past 3 days, the advance of Russian troops in this direction amounted to 11 kilometers along the front and over 3 kilometers deep into the enemy's defense.
Russia says it continues to repel Ukrainian counterattacks, though Kyiv claims successful drone strikes by land and sea, including a major Russian warship at a key port last week.
Many countries worldwide are facing potential food shortages because of export bans on rice that have been put in place first by India and then China. These moves prompted by projected poor harvests following months of bad weather. Well, to discuss, Oliver Farry from our International Affairs desk here at France 24 joins me now in studio. Oliver, firstly, what kind of implications are these measures likely to have right around the world?
Well, it could be quite grave in reality. India's move has sent alarm bells ringing worldwide. India has halted exports of about half of its rice production because of those poor harvests, which had pushed up prices. Now, India is by far the world's biggest exporter of rice, shipping 21.5 million tonnes in 2022, and that's about 40% of global trade. About half of that was non-basmati rice. Now, this is the rice that is affected by the export ban. Much of that goes to Africa, Bangladesh, and also to China. And a knock-on effect is China has now imposed its own export ban. It's not just Indian rice that has caused this, but also recent flooding in China's rice-growing northeast. China's export ban won't have such a big effect internationally. China is the world's biggest producer of rice, but it actually keeps most of its rice for itself. It exports only about 2.2 million tonnes per year. That's about a tenth of India's total, but it is indicative of a wider trend. Now, India has moved to ensure that prices don't get out of control. This is the primary concern of governments. For instance, in India, there are elections, parliamentary elections coming up next spring. Now, food insecurity can quickly lead to instability. We've seen a number of uprisings in recent years, particularly the Arab Spring in Egypt, which were preceded by food protests. Now, while governments obviously want to ensure that their citizens get fed, there's also a more pragmatic reason for caution. Now, most of the major rice exporting countries in the world are located in Asia, and they still have a couple of months more of both monsoons and typhoons to look forward to. So prices have already risen to their highest in 12 years, and it looks like they could rise further. And of course, climate change is a big factor in all of this. This has been exacerbated by adverse weather in various parts of the world. Even the United Kingdom is going to have a poor harvest this year because of a wet summer. There was the monsoon rains in India, flooding in both Pakistan and China. And it suggests that this might be a taste of things to come, where climate change greatly contributes to food insecurity, among other things.
And Oliver, we're not just talking about rice here. The suspension of the grain deal by Russia, and that also threatens to cause a scarcity of wheat around the world.
That's right. Last month, Moscow suspended the grain deal that had assured grain exports from Ukraine's Black Sea ports. It had been fairly successful, 33 million tonnes of grain leaving Ukrainian ports since the start of the war last year. Now, after renewing the deal twice, Russia then put an end to it, saying that Western countries were not honouring their commitments to allow Russian wheat exports to continue. Now, this was largely because sanctions on Russian banks had been making trade with Moscow very complicated for many third countries. Russia also claimed that only 4% of the grain from Ukraine was going to poorer countries. Now, that's not entirely true, because a lot of it was being bought up by intermediaries such as the World Food Programme, and prices did remain stable. Nonetheless, Western countries said exports to less developed countries were lower than desired. With exports of Ukrainian and Russian grain now being throttled, there's a big danger of shortages in all countries, not just developing ones. Richer countries will be able to muddle along and absorb the extra cost, but this isn't a luxury that's available to many poorer countries, particularly in Africa. Many countries rely on rice and other grains for much of the daily calorie intake of their citizens. Now, Vladimir Putin is acutely aware of this, and he's been using grain exports as a wedge issue to shore up support for Russia in the global south. Kiev has also accused Russia of torching Ukrainian wheat fields to further disrupt supplies. So what we're seeing here is a perfect storm, as it were, of conditions that could cause a lot of hardship in poorer countries, which could then in turn spill over into Western countries in the form of increased migration flows. And that's probably only the start of things.
Oliver, thank you so much for that analysis. That is Oliver Farrer joining us from our International Affairs Desk here at France 24. Moving on, and hundreds of flights, trains and ferry crossings have been cancelled across Japan as a powerful typhoon packing heavy rains and strong winds slowly heads westwards. More than 60,000 households in southern regions have been advised to evacuate. Meanwhile, South Korea has begun moving to safety tens of thousands of participants at the World Scout Jamboree ahead of the storm, which is expected to make landfall on Thursday. Seoul is instructing officials to shut down coastal areas, hiking trails, river parks, underpass, tunnels and other places that are vulnerable to flooding. Elsewhere, more than 1 million homes and businesses were without power across the eastern United States on Monday, and thousands of flights were cancelled due to a destructive storm there. At least 2 people have died, including a 15-year-old boy who was hit by a falling tree. Liza Kamenov has more.
Museums, pools, government offices were closed and political and sports events were cancelled as US residents living in the east of the country hurried home, bracing themselves for a series of severe storms on Monday with possible tornadoes and hail. Warnings spread across 10 states from Tennessee to New York, where according to the National Weather Service, over 29.5 million people were most at risk of tornadoes.
There is a significant threat for damaging and locally destructive hurricane-force winds, along with the potential for large hail and tornadoes, even strong tornadoes.
Washington, D.C. was particularly affected, facing winds exceeding 75 miles per hour, hailstones larger than golf balls and a risk of flooding. By Monday evening, over 1.1 million residents living along the storm's path were left without power, as trees and power lines collapsed in multiple states, falling onto roads and homes. These houses in Indiana have had their roofs completely blown off. The Federal Aviation Administration is rerouting planes around the storms after over 2,000 flights were cancelled and more than 5,000 delayed.
It was officially the hottest month ever recorded, beating a previous high set exactly 4 years ago. As heatwaves simmered and wildfires blazed around the globe, July 2023 also saw average air temperatures 0.72 degrees hotter than recent July averages. Here in Europe, amid soaring heat on the Iberian Peninsula, hundreds of firefighters are battling to contain wildfires that have consumed thousands of hectares of land in Spain and Portugal. Well, it's the first such gathering in over a decade. The 8 Amazon nations are coming together for what's being described as a milestone summit aimed at finding ways to curb deforestation and climate change. Under Brazilian President Lula da Silva, destruction of the jungle has fallen by 2/3 when compared to the same period last year.
This is one of the planet's main carbon reserves, and it's heading to a point of no return. Deforestation coupled with forest fires is causing the Amazon rainforest to emit more carbon dioxide than it can absorb. In 2020, its CO2 emissions were 117% higher than the average between 2010 and 2018. The leaders of the 8 countries of the Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization are meeting to discuss urgent solutions to save the forest.
First, the Amazon is severely threatened. Second, we cannot allow it to enter a point of no return. And third, it is impossible to reverse this process if we work separately. So we're going to work together.
On the agenda is working on eradicating deforestation, ending illegal gold mining and policing environmental crime. Brazilian President Lula, who returned to power in January, has pledged to halt deforestation by 2030. After his predecessor Jair Bolsonaro increased it by 75% compared to the average over the last decade. Today, tree felling is slowly decreasing. According to official figures, felling levels dropped by 42.5% between January and July compared with the same period last year. Colombia's Zenu indigenous people are pushing for others to continue the progress that has been made.
If we don't overcome the values of cutthroat competition, of permanent war on nature, it's going to be very difficult to overcome the environmental crises that we are facing at this time of war.
But amid negotiations, the sensitive topic remains the issue of oil projects in the region. In favor of an economy without fossil fuels, Colombia is advocating for a rapid energy transition. But Venezuela and Brazil, both big oil producers, are arguing for a progressive transition and the prolonging of oil extraction in the Amazon.
Ireland is bidding a final farewell to the Grammy Award-winning singer Sinead O'Connor, who died in London last month. Thousands of mourners are gathered in the seaside town of Bray in County Wicklow along the route of her funeral cortege to pay their respects ahead of a private burial. O'Connor rose to international fame in the 1990s, best known for her cover of Nothing Compares to You. The 56-year-old's death prompted a surge of public sympathy in Ireland, where her willingness to criticise the Catholic Church saw her vilified by some and praised as a trailblazer by many more. Well, it's been gradually building for months and now ranks as the 3rd largest jackpot in US history. American lottery players have another shot at a massive Mega Millions prize this Tuesday. The Powerball jackpot hasn't been won since mid-April and is now worth an estimated $1.55 billion. Players trying their luck have the odds stacked against them, though. Their chances of winning are just 1 in 302 million. That is it from us for now, but do stay with us for more world news here on France 24.
People and Profit, your business show that goes beyond the numbers and the corporate jargon. Understand everything related to major business stories and how economy affects our lives. People and Profit on France 24 and France24.com.
They're known for their cuisine and saying hello with a kiss. They only work 35 hours per week, when they're not on strike, that is. How true are these clichés about France? Every week, Florence Villeminot tears apart stereotypes. Join us for insight into French culture and current events to understand what makes the French so unique.
French Connections, presented by Florence Villeminot on France 24 and France24.com.
You can choose Elizabeth, Sarah, Kate, as well as Jeannie, Julia or Catherine. But from July 20th to August 20th, we'll choose Alex. Experience the Women's World Cup